I guess the most memorable thing about the first test when you look over it is the performance of Ashton Agar, even the really fighting performance of Brad Haddin and James Pattinson at the end. But really, if you think about from the other side, even though Jimmy Anderson was the one that took all the wickets, the ones Australians will remember is Stuart Broad, mainly for what happened on day 4 when he had that clear edge behind that went to Michael Clarke, wasn't taken, and he just stood there absolutely poker-faced, which really infuriated the Australians.
And he's still there, Stuart Broad. What's he standing there for? They've all appealed. It looked as if he just nicked it through the keeper. Oh my goodness me.
And probably compounded that then on the last day when the play was coming up to lunch. England desperately didn't want to bowl another over, so he was doing his absolute best to time waste, taking his shoe off, trying to relace it, all that sort of thing. It didn't work. So probably that latter thing wouldn't have actually mattered in isolation, but because it was Stuart Broad, I think Australians really just savaged him for it and really jumped on him. I think the Australian team's immediate and even post-reaction has actually been very mature of them. It would have been very easy for them to drop their bundle, but I think the key issue you've got to look here is that irrespective of whether or not you think Stuart Broad should have walked, the central issue is that the decision was got horribly wrong by the umpire Alim Dar, and had Australia not been so wasteful with the reviews as they were, they would have had a chance to go to the video umpire and say, hey, that's clearly a wrong decision, but because they'd wasted them before, they didn't. Stuart Broad survived.
Like I say, England deserve credit. They've won the first Test match, and there's plenty of times where we could have done things a little bit better to give us a better chance of winning this Test. But we learn from that, and we make sure we improve in the second Test.
I guess the thing that makes it interesting is that you go back just 15 or so months when England were touring over in Sri Lanka. They had a tour match where a similar sort of thing happened. They had a batsman there who edged to then captain Andrew Strauss. It slipped, the umpire didn't see it, and the batsman was given not out. Subsequently, Graham Swan, who was playing in that match, came out, absolutely savaged the Sri Lankan batsman and said he was a cheat and thought it was a disgrace when players 100% know they hit the ball and decide not to walk. Subsequently, this time later, one of his teammates does exactly the same thing. So it's a funny thing about cricket. There's a fine line between, I think if you were getting a small nick here or there, you could sort of excuse waiting for the umpire's decision because batsmen sometimes get really bad decisions. But for something like that is so blatant, I think it really left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths. I guess the thing about Stuart Broad is that he probably knows a bit more about us than we know about him, because it probably has a legacy to try and toughen him up as a cricketer. He came out here in his teens to play a season of club cricket for a Melbourne team called Hoppers Crossing in Melbourne's West, got some experience from that. He was actually part of the last Ashes tour here, but got 2 tests into it and went home injured. That was after the Adelaide match. So for the biggest tests in Melbourne and Sydney, he wasn't there. So fast forward to the end of this year, when England arrives for the return Ashes series, most likely Stuart Broad is going to be playing at all the big venues, including Melbourne and Sydney, and you can guarantee, because of what's happened over the past few days, is the Australian crowds are going to remember exactly what's happened at Trent Bridge and are going to remind Stuart Broad about that at every opportunity.